Yeah, Bob. You remember Bob, the guy that's gonna launch a nuclear attack? You got any more abuse you want to hurl my way? Or are you ready to go in here and take care of Bob?
What do you propose, Bob?
When in doubt, C4.
Well, hey there, YouTube. It's your favorite little geeky Star Wars Penguin Bob here. And we are back for day number 4 of Star Wars on Trial rewatch that Film Threat Critics Court did a couple months ago. And so we're going to get into watching whether or not Disney Lucasfilm is guilty of murdering the Star Wars franchise. And today we're actually going to be doing Count 3, and we will watch along, and I may pause it periodically and discuss what they're talking about, or we just kind of watch it and see what's going on here, and definitely look forward to any thoughts you may have in chat. If you just want to sit there and lurk and watch, that's fine too. I'm used to that. Once again, I don't know if this particular video has any type of profanity or anything in it, but I use a profanity filter, and sometimes that filter actually makes things even more fun, I think. So you will see the subtitles on the screen, and you can go and notice that the words don't always line up, and unmute. Because I don't cuss. This little penguin is a clean penguin. So anyway, let's get on to it, shall we? No more dawdling around. This penguin will sit here and just yammer on for no reason at all, just going on about things like shoving pencils in Jello or slapping a fish on your neighbor or something like that. So I gotta get started. Otherwise, I'll just sit here and yammer about nothing that makes any sense. Yeah, blah blah blah. Rebel, rebel, rebel. Hey, Tracy, glad you're here. All right, so let's get into it. It just started dropping ice cubes. Exactly. Hey, Tracy, how are you doing today? I'm good. I got my iced coffee here, ready to get into another day of Critics Court on putting Star Wars on trial. Cool. All right, well, let's get into it, shall we? Okay, so let's just go ahead and start it, and we'll continue watching Star Wars on trial. I have water, need to drink more water along with the coffee. Yeah, the only two things I drink during the day anyway are my iced coffee and flavored water. So when I get done with like my 1 or 2 cups of iced coffee, I switch over to water. But we always need more drink more water. Water is good stuff. It makes ice. Which, as you know, penguins like ice. Sipping on some iced coffee. All right, as we wait for court to start here. Oh, there's Alan Ng, special counsel.
All rise.
You may be seated.
Frozen hands, yes.
Continuing with the proceedings in the case of Disney Lucasfilm on trial for the murder of the Star Wars franchise.
Honorable Chris Gore. He just had a birthday yesterday.
Today, charge number 3. Mr. Ng, would you please read the charges?
Yes, Your Honor. All right.
So, Chris Gore, if you ever watch this little penguin wants to wish you a happy birthday. All right, going on.
Charge number 3. The film threat jury, on behalf of the citizens of the Star Wars fandom, charges Lucasfilm Disney with the offense of negligent handling and management of the Star Wars franchise. On or about the 30th day of October 2012, Lucasfilm Disney did begin to negligently handle and manage the franchise by failing to create and implement a plan for the sequel trilogy. Failure to properly plan out the story for sequel trilogy
Oops, that's the wrong one.
In a final trilogy that provided fans with an unsatisfying conclusion to the Skywalker storyline. This, coupled with the hiring of hack activist writers, the decanonization of the EU, and plagiarizing old plot points, caused the franchise to never attain the box office potential it could have had.
Just a reminder to those of you who are part of the jury, that includes every single viewer of this show right now. Court is now in session.
And once again, the link to this video, as well as the court documents, are in the description of this video, and also a link to all the people involved in the Critics Court. Chris Gore, Film Threat, YouTube channel, and all that. Those links are all in the description. And I really do like this animation. I don't like the fact that Star Wars has been destroyed, but... Oh. I'm going to fast forward through this part. I let it play the other time, and I got copyright claimed. There we go. Oh, cool. Mr. Blackwood's back.
Mr. Blackwood is joining us today as our court sketch artist. You can follow Todd Blackwood on his social media, which is
he's the best part of this whole court.
PDX He is our court sketch artist.
His
for
website
today.
link is in the video description as
And
well.
now we will bring on. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood, for all of your efforts. We appreciate it. Special Counsel Ng. Oh,
That's
that is
KK
a very
and
pleasant
JJ.
shot of Ms.
Who's in that? Who's in the back? Looks like Mickey and somebody else.
Kennedy, Mr. Abrams, and others asleep behind the wheel, so it seems, in this illustration.
That's
if you are
funny.
listening to this rather than watching on television or your mobile device. I will bring on members of the prosecution for today.
Your Honor, with all due respect, I just want
Yes.
to make a motion again that you instruct the jury to smash that like button and subscribe to the Film Threat.
Mrs.
YouTube
Potato
channel.
Kennedy, yes. I love that. Well, I like this filter.
I'm not sure if Mr. Ng is aware, this is a court of law. This isn't a job interview for Red Lobster manager. And while I appreciate the effort,
Red
I'd like to
Lobster
see a little
manager.
bit more courtroom decorum when it comes to your fashion, and perhaps the ill timing of the asking to like, share, and subscribe to the Film Threat YouTube channel. I will allow it. I will allow it this one time. And let's get started, folks. For the prosecution, we have Mr. Connors. Please introduce yourself, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Thomas Connors. I am a commentator and critic. I am here today to argue for the prosecution about the destruction of Star Wars on behalf of Disney.
Yeah,
and
I also
Lucasfilm.
encourage you to
Well,
like and
today,
subscribe to Film
for these
Threat,
purposes, sir,
as well as to my channel as
you
well.
are an attorney.
All right.
You are a lawyer defending the pop culture arts. Also joining us on the prosecution team, thank you, Mr. Connors, for your attendance today. I appreciate it. Mr. Montgomery, please
Yes, Your
introduce yourself, sir.
Yes,
I
my
like
name is
him.
Shane Montgomery, Esquire, the Popcast, pop culture, everything honest, Your Honor.
They do a lot of Trek stuff,
Thank you,
Popcast
sir, for
guys.
your attendance.
and I like him.
Members of the defense returning from our first episode. Father Dave.
Oh, good.
Thank
Father
you for
Dave's
joining
back.
us, Father Dave.
Good afternoon. My name is Father Dave. I'm an Orthodox priest.
He
and
made
I
very
run
good
a
logical
blog
points
on
last
old
time.
school role-playing games, and I come to this defense because of my love of Star Wars.
And I guess I should just call you Mr. Monkey King.
Works. Or Mr. Willie's fine.
Mr. Willie, I will call you Mr. Willie. Please don't read into that, members of the jury. Mr. Willie, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Willie, also known as Willie the Monkey King. I have two channels. One is an animation channel, and the other is a music channel where I compose music and share that.
Thank you. Thank you for your attendance today, Mr. Willie. I am, as is my right as the judge in this trial, I'm making a slight change to the proceedings to move things along quickly.
Okay.
The prosecution will present their case first in the charge of count number 3. After the prosecution's presentation, there will be time for the defense to cross-examine and ask questions of the prosecution. The same goes for the defense. The defense will then present their case, and there will be time for cross-examination, effectively questions from the opposite side.
Nice.
Is
Changing
the
things up a
prosecution
little bit
ready? Who will
today.
be?
Your
Who will
Honor.
be present? Yes,
Your Honor,
yes,
Your
Mr.
Honor, I would
Montgomery.
like to submit evidence that is irrefutable by the defense and will prove without a shadow of a doubt that Lucasfilm Disney did in fact negligently handle and manage the Star Wars franchise. Your Honor, can I please present that evidence quickly?
Mr. Montgomery, you're getting a little ahead of the game here. You will have your chance. I just want to ask, so you'll be presenting first, and then Mr. Connors will follow you, and then we'll have cross-examination by the defense. Is that correct? You understand?
Yes, that sounds good.
All right, let's talk about count number 3.
Here we go. Count 3. Negligent handling and management of the Star Wars franchise.
Mr. Montgomery, you have the floor I will put you full screen.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, I actually have irrefutable evidence. I'd like to go ahead and share that right now with you guys if I could.
I actually watch his channel, Popcast guys.
It'll be very quick, actually.
He has a lot of good takes on Trek and dives into the deep lore and stuff. But he talks about other things besides Star Trek, but Star Trek is their main stuff on that channel.
Oops.
Cool. Well, I thought he was going to go full screen.
Okay, if you guys can all, this is irrefutable evidence I'd like to
there we go.
share with you guys. Just, here we go.
Look, throws away lightsaber. Oh, boy. Yeah, at the end of Force Awakens.
Your Honor, I think that displays exactly what is completely wrong with what happened with Star Wars Disney. The fact that Luke Skywalker throws away his lightsaber should immediately, put Disney under... in fact, we should just go directly to the execution phase of the trial. Can we just, have them summarily executed, please?
Wow.
We have more charges to discuss.
He just went right there.
While I understand the evidence you presented, which is a scene from the opening of The Last Jedi in which Jedi Master Skywalker throws his lightsaber
Last Jedi
over his shoulder.
Picked up on the
we're
end
looking
of
for a
Force
much more
Awakens.
compelling argument here, sir. I'm sure we'd like to hear more
Yes.
of your argument.
Okay, so here's what I would say. And listen, I've got other witnesses. We're going to have today with us, we're going to have Luke Skywalker himself will be providing evidence, as well as the wife of George Lucas. But before we get to that, I just want to simply say that on October 30th, 2012, when Disney bought Star Wars for approximately $4.5 billion, Bob Iger was extraordinarily excited about this opportunity. Less than 4 months later, a plan was laid out. The problem is that Bob wanted his money back, and he wanted it back quickly. And he didn't take into consideration the fact that Disney, throughout time, has always taken approximately 3 years to produce each of its films. So if you go back to the original, Episode 4 was put out in 77, Empire 80, and Jedi in 83. And even the prequel series was done in 3-year increments. But Bob Iger wanted something else. He wanted Disney done quickly. And when he did that, he decided they were going to be put out every 2 years as opposed to every 3 so that they could get their money back even faster. And here's what Bob thought. He said, doesn't matter. The fans are going to show up no matter what we do. And when Kathleen was brought on by George Lucas to head the franchise and to be the Kevin Feige, so to speak, of Star Wars, she did not have the experience nor the expertise to be able to do so, nor was she a fan of Star Wars in such a way that would allow her to put Star Wars first and the fans first. I would like to show you that as evidence here from Mark Hamill himself.
Please present your evidence.
Takes too long to share these screens. Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Take a look at what Mark Hamill himself had to say here with Rian Johnson, who is the defamed director of Episode 8.
Now, if I'm Mr. Montgomery, there's a icon in the lower right of that video image, which you could go full screen. That may help. There. Yeah. Let's do that from now on. If we'll be this goes to everyone, please, that we'll be sharing evidence in this trial.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, because I have no clue as to what the hell I'm doing. So thank you very much. Here we go.
Can I just say, though, a lot of times I would say to Ryan, we got to think about the fans. And he said, no, we got to think about the story, and we got to think about our movie. Which
It's right there, Your Honor. You got to think about the fans. But Rian Johnson said, no, we have to make our movie. So that of course, is one of the biggest problems of Star Wars. But why did this happen? What happened? So when J.J. Abrams was in the process of destroying Episode 7, Rian Johnson was writing Episode 8. Did the two talk to each other?
Hey,
perhaps.
Parents. Yeah, he does have an arcade
but
cabinet.
But it didn't really matter because he told Rian Johnson that it was his movie and he needed to do with it what he wanted to do with it. As you see here, Mark Hamill describe and repeat. Rian Johnson was making his own movie. So if you go back to the fact that Bob Iger wanted it put out every 2 years, okay, now agreed, J.J. Abrams didn't do a very good job. Could 7, 8, and 9 have been good if he had had control of all 3 movies? Well, for the sake of what we're talking about here today and the fact of the story having, the story being written properly, having the same director for all 3 movies obviously would have played into at least the story having more, the story being more conclusive, connecting more, and making the fans a little happier. Not saying JJ would have done a better job, but because he only had 2 years, he did not take on episode 8 because he simply couldn't do it. He's in the process of making 7, so Rian Johnson gets 8. So, but the problem here is, Your Honor, that nobody really understands Star Wars as they probably should. So what I'd like to do is provide more evidence. The person who is probably more responsible for the success of Star Wars than perhaps George Lucas himself, and that would be his ex-wife, Marcia Lucas. And I'd like you to hear her words on what she felt like Kennedy and J.J. Abrams had done for Star Wars. And this sharing process takes too damn long. Okay.
You're doing fine, Mr. Montgomery. Please.
Yeah, now Marcia Lucas is the ex-wife of George Lucas, and she was involved during the making of the original trilogy. She was like an editor. Well, basically, she was kind of like George Lucas's right-hand person in a way. They worked on this stuff together. She did quite a bit for Star Wars.
Just present your evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. Here we go.
The person we should listen to is the person who is probably the most responsible for Star Wars success next to George Lucas, and that's his first wife, Marcia. The woman who is responsible for the good luck kiss, Obi-Wan Kenobi dying, and the trench run leading up to the destruction of the Death Star, among other things. Well, she had this to say about Star Wars following the release of Episode 8. I always liked her. She was full of beans. She was really smart and really bright. Now that she is running Lucasfilm and making movies, it seems to me that Kathy and J.J. Abrams don't have a clue about making Star Wars. They don't get it. And J.J. Abrams is writing these stories. When I saw where they kill Han Solo, I was furious. Absolutely, positively, there was no rhyme or reason to it. I thought, You don't get the Jedi story. You don't get the magic of Star Wars. They killed Luke Skywalker and they don't have Princess Leia anymore. And they're spitting out movies every year. And they think it's important to appeal to a woman's audience. So now their main character is this female who's supposed to have Jedi powers, but we don't know how she got Jedi powers or who she is. It sucks. The storylines are terrible. Awful. You can quote me. J.J. Abrams, Kathy, talk to me. Marcia didn't...
Your Honor, I think Marcia says it all there when she says, it sucks. And with that, I would like to rest my evidence.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Montgomery. Do you have any idea what, and I'm asking because I genuinely don't know, what does the phrase, she was full of beans, mean? She said that it was full of beans. Beans, as we know, if you consume beans, one might expel gas. Was she saying she's full of gas? She's full of... I don't want to make an assumption. I'm just curious if I am not familiar with the term full of beans, and I'm just curious if you have a...
Wait a minute. Let me, I got an answer to that.
In other news... Oh, my apologies.
I couldn't help it. All right, continue on.
What she meant by that remark.
Yes, it is well known, actually, Your Honor, that Kathleen is very gassy. And it is true, Your Honor, and yeah, I'll back that up.
Your Honor, I'll just add that according to the dictionary, full of beans refers to being not correct or truthful. Full of nonsense.
Yeah, full of nonsense, like Tracy said there.
Interesting. Mr. Connors, are you prepared to continue the prosecution's case?
I am,
But if
and
she's
I
had
would
a
like
lot
to
of
thank
Taco
Mr.
Bell, she
Montgomery
also
for
could be full of
his
gas.
wonderful argument there, because I believe he's made some very good points, especially along the lines of The Last Jedi, because it may be true that that is where the actual murder occurred. It was a slow abuse to that moment, but the actual murder did occur under the reign of Ryan Johnson and Kathleen. But I would like to take you back a little further, because my colleague today and many colleagues before me have pointed out that this was kind of built on faulty ground to begin with. You had a situation where, and I would like to present my first piece of evidence here, which is a piece from Esquire, where J.J. Abrams, the director and I believe co-writer of The Force Awakens and producer, had this to say about the situation in the Lucasfilm offices. He says they didn't have a real plan when they made the new Star Wars trilogy. So this, I believe, is one of the most damning pieces of evidence you could have here, is that there was no plan. I mean, he admits it. The core leader of this initial plan admits it there. Now, of course, we've had Daisy Ridley and others, including Simon Pegg, claim that there was other plans, but regardless of those plans, as my colleague had pointed out so rightfully so, were put to rest, just like the soul of Star Wars with Mr. Ryan Johnson. And I know some other arguments have been made before about, oh, this was already dead, when it was clearly not dead, or Disney wouldn't have paid the money they had paid for it. If it was the case, that I believe so.
Yeah, they were handed
and really,
plans
we have
and
another problem
outlines
here, and
from
the
Lucas.
legacy beyond the movies, right? What
they
was
did
the
ignore
idea
them.
here that we had, and that was that you would want this seed to grow into a forest of Star Wars films. Well, what we've had here is a problem, and this problem is this revolving door, and you'll hear me bring up this revolving door quite a bit, because I myself have coined a term, or a saying, I should say, where I've said she has fired more people than she's hired. And I know that may sound funny because it is meant to be a bit in jest, but at this point it's not inaccurate. And I give you also now the second piece of evidence I have here, and this is a long list.
Could you share screen, Mr. Connors, so that we can all share your evidence?
Yeah. I am.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Connors.
Did I not share the last time too?
You didn't share the last one. We weren't able.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought I did.
We can go back and we can look at that. I'll allow it. I'll allow
all right,
it.
I'll reshare those real quick just so you
That's
all
fine.
in the audience
That's
can
fine.
see here.
That's cool, Perry.
We have this would be the piece with Simon
You
Pegg
should
here.
stand for the original
please
vision.
share your last piece of evidence
The
for
person who
our
created it.
jury
Not
to
a problem.
examine.
I thought I had. That's my fault.
That's fine.
And then prior to that, we had. Whoops, that's the wrong way. Let me see here. Where did I put it now? Of course, now I lost the one. But yes, that was the Esquire piece, and then the Daisy Ridley piece as well. And then we have now my next piece of evidence, which will feed into more, is this laundry list. And I want to bring this up here, because what we have here refers to what I mean when I said Kathleen Kennedy fired more people than she's hired. And this is not even a complete list, folks.
Wow.
As you'll see when we get going here. We have the 2 completed projects, The Force Awakens and Last Jedi. These were completed by their original directors and creators. But other than that, none of the other projects under Lucasfilm and Disney have had any success.
Started by Rian Johnson, but finished by J.J. Abrams.
And I grant you this. We have, or I give you this evidence right here. We have Gareth Edwards, who was working on Rogue One. He was removed. Josh Trank was supposed to work on an earlier Boba Fett project. He was also removed.
Wow.
Lord and Miller were removed, and this is, and I insert this into evidence via the brother of the director, Ron Howard himself, that Lord and Miller had shot for 88 days on the project before they were removed. Now, for the court, for those in the jury who may not know, an average film, that is pretty much the time you need to shoot one. So that means they pretty much had almost shot this entire film when they brought in another director to completely reshoot the film. We also have Colin Trevorrow, who wrote Duel of the Fates and was meant to direct it. He also was let go when J.J. Abrams was brought back in to clean up the mess that Rian Johnson had created with The Last Jedi. Then we have Stephen Daldry, who was supposed to be working on an Obi-Wan project. He did not make that project. James Mangold, who is recently worked on Indiana Jones, was also attached to a Boba Fett project at one time. Benioff and Weiss of Game of Thrones fame also had a project that was canceled.
Well, there's definitely
Patty
mismanagement
Jenkins
going
of
on
Wonder
with
Woman
their
fame
finances. Yeah,
also had a very high-profile project
and they're
get
suffering for it
canceled.
today.
J.D. Dillard has also had a film project canceled. Kevin Feige and Michael Waldron
They're in
have now
so
had
much
a project
debt, it's
canceled.
not funny right now.
Damon Lindelof and Josh Britt Gibson have been let go from the Ray project. And we also have since learned about David Gordon Green, who also had proposed a project that did not go forward at Disney as well.
Wow.
So Lord knows how many more victims there are behind the scenes of this huge injustice by Disney, where an entire generation of directors and creators have not been able to put their voice into one of the biggest pop culture franchises of all time. This is an injustice beyond any injustice before when it comes to this franchise, regardless of what damage George Lucas may or may not have inflicted prior to this. I don't think the denial can be made that this has gone nothing but in the wrong direction. And we brought up time and time again, the prosecution has brought up, and the defense for that matter, about this idea of the feminization of Star Wars, which is really hard to deny. It's become a problem.
Drawing?
In fact, we even have high-profile papers like my next exhibit here. You have Business Insider bringing light to the fact that Bob Iger has a Star Wars problem at Disney. And this was already back in November of 2022. This has been an ongoing thing in all of the major trades when it comes to Star Wars. They have a problem. And that problem is a franchise that they killed. And that is where I rest my case, Your Honor.
As the prosecution is resting, the defense may now cross-examine. We will go to comments from our jury. We have some starred comments. We will get to those, I promise. Defense is now your opportunity to cross-examine and directly ask questions related to what you have just seen, and then you may present your case. Who would like to go first? Mr. Willie.
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Montgomery, where is the proof that Kathleen told Rian Johnson to make his own movie?
The proof is actually in several interviews. You even heard it from Rian Johnson there himself. So he said there that, he was encouraged to, we need to make the movie for ourselves. And in several interviews, Kathleen has talked about how she gives all of her directors the power to do what they want to do. I'll have to go back and I can produce this as evidence later. The evidence that was used actually to make that video, which was made about a year ago, where she did provide evidence that she had encouraged Rian Johnson to make the movie his own and she's not wrong. I mean, when you think about it, all of the movies that she produced before prior to working on Disney was a fantastic producer. She's attached to many great movies. What is it about those movies that were great? Well, they were independent franchises, independent movies. And she wasn't responsible for the creative guidance of those movies. And she is the Kevin Feige of Disney.
There's things that JJ has done, like,
and so that I can provide that evidence
the TV
for
show
you, Your
Fringe.
Honor, if you'd like that.
I also provide my other piece of evidence I did bring up earlier. I'll just present it here now, and that is that whatever plan was in place
like
with J.J. Abrams,
he wants to repurpose
was thrown out the window, according to Daisy Ridley and Simon Pegg.
He's a major repurposer.
Den of Geek article that I mentioned earlier that I didn't get a chance to show. And that clearly says there was an origin plan, and it got tossed out the window. Well, who tossed it out the window? Mr. Johnson. So I don't think if he wasn't given carte blanche, then that wouldn't be the case. At least that's my interpretation of it.
I concur.
Thank you, Mr. Connors.
I could back that up.
Mr. Ng?
Sorry,
Mr. Ng?
I can back that up with the interview. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, in the interview with Wired Magazine and J.J. Abrams, he states, and quote, Ryan has asked for a couple of things here and there that he needs for his story. He is an incredibly accomplished filmmaker and an incredibly strong writer. So the story he told, what we were doing, and went in the direction that he felt was best, but that was very much in line with what we were thinking as well. Now here's the important part. But you're right. That will be his movie. He's going to do it in the way he sees fit.
Wow.
He's neither asking for nor does he need me to oversee the process. And that's a direct quote from J.J. Abrams.
Thank you, sir.
Father Dave, did you have any questions for cross-examine?
I just want to confirm with Mr. Connors that he does admit the fact
that
that the
was
Star
a
Wars
pretty cool show,
franchise
too.
was not in the best place
100.
prior to the purchase of the franchise by Disney.
I did admit that it was not in the same place it was before, but I also did enter into evidence that the fact that it was sold to Disney for $4.05 billion and the fact that it was still a flourishing franchise. The Force Awakens was the highest grossing movie of all time is my next piece to argue that point. If it was a dead franchise, then I don't think that would have happened at that point.
If it was dead, I was asking if it was damaged.
Again, if it was damaged, I don't think that Disney would have paid $4.05 billion for it, or The Force Awakens would have been the highest grossing film until Avengers Endgame knocked it off that pedestal. That's my answer to that.
Any other questions from the defense for the prosecution in this cross-examination phase of the trial? Father Dave? Mr. Willie?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, let's briefly pivot. Mr. Blackwood, you are working tirelessly on sketches during this. I see you have drawn Mr. Connors as Mr. Connors as He-Man. Is that what that is? That well, then there you are. That Mr. Connors in well, there you know. We can't unsee that now. We can't unsee
Very
that
accurate.
Looks good.
You will be I assume, Mr. Blackwood, you'll be posting
There's
all of
Mickey
these
screaming.
courtroom sketches on your Instagram.
I love
at
love
Blackwood
Mr.
_PDX.
Blackwood stuff.
You'll get
That's
to see
so
all these
cool.
sketches. Please continue
so
to
good,
share
but he's
those with
also on
us
point.
throughout the trial. That is
That's Luke
sketch
drinking
of
blue
Mr.
milk.
Luke Skywalker, Master Jedi Luke Skywalker, drinking blue breast milk.
Wonderful.
That's all
I'm sorry, Your Honor. I need a moment just for myself. After seeing this picture, it still affects me.
Doesn't all milk come from a breast?
Technically, all milk comes from a breast. And we're going to end that conversation there. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Yes, that's a very graphic representation of that scene. For those of you that are not watching and only listening, you may consider yourselves lucky.
I apologize, Your Honor. I've gotten my composure back.
Thank you, Mr. Connors. We're going to read some of the comments from those among the jury in the chat. We have a lot of comments, questions, and serious concerns from fans. And I want to thank them for their attendance today. Nearly 800 people watching live. I think it's 700 and Mr. Ng, what would that be? 760?
Well, 67 now, but I'm pretty sure you were referring to being 769.
Yes, we should.
Your Honor,
hopefully we'll reach that number at some point. Let me go to our comments and questions before we pivot then to the defense. And I just want to remind you, Amanda Nowicki has become a YouTube member. So I want to say, if you are a member of the Film Threat YouTube channel, you'll get access to our Discord, and you can continue the conversation in our Critics Court forum.
Let's move over to just where the defense starts picking up now.
With that, we will pivot to the defense. Who would like to go
I
first?
skipped through the super
Father
chat
Dave,
because
Mr. Willie.
That would be me. Give me just a second.
I'm more interested in the actual
Mr.
court
Willie, I will
proceedings.
put you front and center on the screen. Mr. Blackwood, perhaps you can share some more of your sketches today. That well, there you are. There you are. Mr. Willie, I'm putting you front and center now.
Is that supposed to be Mr. Willie, I
More
guess?
Evidence.
Hold on, I'm experiencing a bit of technical difficulties, so it's just gonna.
No, it's fine. It's no, it showed up. It did.
I know it showed up, but my notes didn't show up.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna
I'll give you a moment to
I'm just going to just put it out like this, if that's okay. If that pleases the court.
Can you share screen?
Yeah. Let me share screen again. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay. So according to Lucas, all of Star Wars was planned out. The original trilogy as well as the prequels. That is a lie. The prequels were planned out. However, I will prove that despite Lucasfilm's original plans following through for the sequel
He's having
trilogy,
technical
it is a
difficulties.
moot point since the original trilogy didn't have a plan, and that the great plot twists of the original trilogy were made to satisfy solving narrative problems. J.J. Abrams allegedly had the plan for the sequel trilogy, as even stated by the prosecution. I say allegedly because according to Daisy Ridley, in an interview on the Jimmy Kimmel show, there was a plan for her parentage in the sequel trilogy. Abrams also told Adam Driver for his plans for Kylo Ren story arc, as Driver said in an interview with Ian's Life. J.J. Abrams told me when I met him for the first time that I should imagine a journey of the character completely opposite of Darth Vader. So albeit a loose plan, the notion was there that there were, so that the idea of them having no plan was false. However, it seemed Rian Johnson jettisoned these outlines to make a powerful yet divisive film in the franchise, The Last Jedi. It was a film that closed all the mystery boxes Abrams set up that built fan excitement. However, let's say having a loose plan is as bad as having a no plan. Then the Infinity Saga should be bad. Because in an interview with IGN, Joss Whedon stated that there was no plan for what to do with Thanos
He was good
after
in a
his
movie
cameo.
called 65.
So maybe having no plan.
That's on Netflix.
Maybe the fact that the Infinity Saga was so
I think it's on Netflix.
so good. Maybe
Either
that's
way,
a
it's
fluke.
really good.
Or maybe not.
He did a good job in it.
Despite Lucas's claims that he had the original trilogy planned out, before the release of Star Wars back in '77, Lucas commissioned writer Alan Dean Foster to write a sequel novel in case Star Wars was a flop called Splinter of the Mind's Eye. In a link, I said in a link for the defense, a link to the Wikipedia page of Splinter of a Mind's Eye. And this is so you can see that behind the scenes information, such as the direction of the book being abandoned when Star Wars became a hit. But more so, it features the plot that depicts none of the characters that would be introduced in Empire, such as Lando, Yoda, or Boba Fett. So if Lucas really planned out the original trilogy like he said, there would be at least seeds of these characters within the book. The idea of Vader being Luke's father wasn't introduced until later. One of the biggest things that were planned in the twist, according to Lucas, was Vader being Luke's father. Something that Lucas has gone on record saying that he planned since the original Star Wars. According to his ex-wife, who is Marsha Lucas, as we mentioned earlier, who had saved Star Wars in the editing bay and helped develop certain story ideas that became bedrocks of Star Wars. In the docu-series Icon Unearthed, as stated in the Inverse article, the Inverse article interviewing the director Brian Volk Weiss, George Lucas was struggling to come up with some kind of big twist for Empire's third act. While stuck, Marcia and Lucas invited screenwriters Willard Huck and Gloria Katz over for dinner. The couple had worked with Lucas before, including an uncredited rewrite of A New Hope. When Lucas described his struggles with the Empire story, Huck joked, "You can always make Darth Vader Luke's father." And this is also evidenced in the original screenwriter Lee Brackett, who wrote the first draft of Empire Strikes Back, there was no mention of Vader being Luke's father. In fact, if I can share another screen, in an article from Screen Rant, there is an excerpt from Brackett's original script where it says here,
yeah, it was a good twist.
Anakin,
it also goes to show that George Lucas was willing to listen to other people around him,
training Luke. Sorry,
his vision better.
With mentioning to Luke that he had a twin sister, not Leia, and Anakin explaining that he told Obi-Wan not to reveal his sibling for fear that Vader would use her as a hostage. And here's the depiction as well. Anakin, you've grown up well, Luke. I'm proud of you. Did your uncle ever speak to you about your sister? Luke, my sister? I have a sister. But why didn't Uncle Owen? Anakin, it was my request. When I saw the Empire closing in, I sent you both away for your own safety, far apart from each other. Luke, where is she? What's her name? Anakin, if I were to tell you, Darth Vader would get that information from your mind and use her as a hostage. Not yet, Luke. When it's time, Luke, you will take from me the oath of a Jedi Knight. And for my... Oops. Screen. And for my last bit of evidence is that Leia being Luke's sister was added later. Originally, Luke's sister was to be identified later, but Lucas changed his mind. In an anecdote, in the annotated notes of the script, Luke Skywalker made Luke and Leia's siblings out of a creative purpose, as stated in the annotated screenplays. In the end, I had a knowledge in the fight between Luke and his father of why Luke makes the final turn to the bad side of the Force and tries to kill his father. Director Richard Marquand was trying to block out the fight between Luke and Vader, and we got down to the point underneath the throne room there, and he said, you know, the script sort of says that Vader says something that upsets Luke, or something vague like that. And we didn't have the actual moment that we needed where you got the sense that Luke is hiding. He's not going to fight him. He'd rather die first, and then something turns him and makes him fight. And in the process of evolving the script and evolving the importance of Leia as his sister, it'd be sitting right there in front of my face, and became obvious that turning her to the dark side would be the thing that sends Luke off.
I think it works.
So,
but
my point being, oh, whoops, let me go back to this page. So, does Lucas not having the original trilogy plan out change the quality of these films? I'd say no. Does it make Luke a liar? Does it make Lucas a liar? That's not what this argument is about. However, it is for the best that the original trilogy wasn't planned out. Look at the divisive prequels as evidence of that. To quote the commenter Joseph Reinman from Kiara, you need to understand that the original trilogy wasn't envisioned to be a trilogy. They made one movie they were sure was going to flop, then kept their fingers crossed that they'd get another one.
Right.
When the movie turned out to be a hit, they got to do Empire and planned to keep going for at least 3 to 5 more
Lucas
films,
started with
depending on how
episode
things
4.
turned out. Maybe what was part of the success of the original trilogy was that there were no guarantees that there would be another one. So they tried to tell the best story they could. Regardless, the idea of the sequel trilogy is somehow lacking because they didn't have an overreaching plan is moot. The best trilogy didn't need one.
Hey, Your Honor, I need to object on relevance here. Willie, all due respect, can you offer the relevance of this testimony, please, sir?
I would also like to object to the admission of anything from Lee Brackett's Star Wars script, because Anakin was not named in that script.
Mr. Willie, your response? The jury is listening.
Sure, absolutely. So the point I'm making is that the fact that the original trilogy, that the sequel trilogy didn't have a plan it's moot point because the original trilogy didn't have one. Now, the fact of the sequel trilogy being good or bad, that's a matter up to the audience for taste. Because as you can see, both trilogies, they have their fans.
If I may, this goes to the idea of mismanagement and negligence.
Exactly.
Because if the Star Wars original trilogy could go off and be the creative and financial success that it was without a plan, basically making stuff up as we go, then we can't call that very same style of filmmaking with what Disney did with the sequel trilogy negligence or mismanagement. That's the point.
Well, you have. I would argue that, you know, as the creator of a product, so as George Lucas is the creator of Star Wars, and as he's creating the original trilogy, which we got to remember is we don't have a franchise yet until he starts telling the story. So once he creates his trilogy, no matter how many times he's changed it or whether it's planned out or not, once the creator has turned over the product to other creatives, it's paramount that those creatives, as we've seen in IPs like Star Trek, it's critical that the canon or that the story that is followed, the respect of what's happened before is followed. And would it still be Star Wars if somebody just decided to say, well, I'm going to do what George did and I'm going to make it whatever I want it to be?
Well, you get from reading the synopsis of the plot from Splinter of the Mind's Eye that he did allow people to go their own way for telling the story, and he actually just rejected the entire book.
So are you basically then saying that as the creator, he has the right to say what is canon and not canon at his will at that point?
Yeah, you gotta respect
whether something
the
has
actual
come out into the public
story
eye.
that come from the actual
that's his
creator
prerogative
himself.
as the creator, and I think that's what my colleague was arguing in his point. But I don't know if we were ready for a rebuttal on their argument yet, so I just was, yeah. I have no questions at this point.
Let's move on to Father Dave and comments you'll say before we take a brief recess, and then we will have open debate, as well as comments from our jury. And I want to thank the over 800 members of our jury. Normally, the limit is 12. There's no limit on Critics Court. Father Dave, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to remind the jury of the actual count against Lucasfilm and Disney. And that is they begin to negligently handle and manage the franchise. And some of the reasons pointed to by the actual charge are
Yeah, that's kind of the
hiring
heart of what
activist writers,
this
the
whole trial's
decanonization
about.
of the EU and the
Whether or
plagiarization
not
of
Disney,
old
Lucasfilm
plot points,
did murder Star
causing
Wars
the franchise to never
because of a
attain the
lack
box
of
office
respect
potential
of what
it
came
could have
before
had.
of what
Now,
George
as the
Lucas created.
prosecution pointed out, Episode 7 had a box office of $2 billion. That's not mismanagement, and that's not negligence from a business point of view. And in terms of the decanonization of the EU, you just made the argument that the creator has the ability to determine what is and what isn't canon. But regardless, this may be unpopular because I know there's a lot of people out there who like the EU. I'm not one of them. I was actually quite pleased that Disney made the business decision to clear up the canonical gray area that was the EU, because there are a lot of stories there that George had put a stamp of approval on, but he reserved the right, as he did with that book that came out after Star Wars, to change his mind. And so therefore, while technically canonical, they were also technically not canonical if George had to say so. So in order to free up any confusion, because
I don't know if I
there's a lot of
necessarily
Star Wars
believe that,
books,
Perrin, because
Disney made the
there is
business
room
decision to say, okay,
for
we're not going to consider
new
the
stuff
EU
all the
canonical
time.
just so that we can move forward
Because
in
that
a
would
way
indicate to
will
me
get
that
people
if they
a
got
new
rid of
Star
the
Wars
EU
movie as fast as possible.
for the purpose
And
to
so
make
that
room
was
for
a
their own
business
stuff,
decision that was
that
made. Didn't prevent
Disney
them from
Lucasfilm
going
actually
back
cared about canon
and
in the
using
first place.
stuff from the EU.
They did.
It
I don't
just
think we'd be in this
cleared
problem.
the way to make the picture clear. This is not canonical. Disney Star Wars
But
is
you
going
made
to
a
do
good
something
point.
new and hopefully fun. And as far as plagiarizing old plot points, I made the case in episode 2 that the format of storytelling that George started with Star Wars and continued with the prequels, there are certain plot points, certain leitmotifs that happen in generational stories. And he had those same plot points in the prequels as he did with the original trilogy. The fact that J.J. Abrams chose to do something similar with his movie that made $2 billion is, again, not negligence. It's not mismanagement. And while many of us may be disappointed with what Disney has ultimately done with Star Wars, we may not like the finished product. We may not be happy with the way that this trilogy ended up. It's you still haven't really shown that this is negligence. You really haven't shown that this is mismanagement. This trilogy made a lot of money. Yes, some of us don't particularly care for it, but mismanagement and negligence are not things I think you can accuse Disney of. I rest.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Father Dave. Mr. Blackwood, I see that you seem to be drawing, it looks like Mickey Mouse. I'm not sure exactly what you've been working on here. I see.
There's Potato
I
Kennedy.
see Jabba the. I see. Sorry, His Captain Kennedy. I'm going to object to myself making a bad joke. Thank you,
Judge
Mr.
Gore.
Blackwood. Your efforts are much appreciated here on Critics
Yes,
Court.
I like his
I
stuff.
hope that our jury appreciates.
Regardless of the whole
these
trial,
wonderful
I'm
drawings that you're
really
providing
enjoying
for us
Mr.
today.
Blackwood's
We're going to
stuff.
take a brief recess
Really am.
of just a
Your
few
Honor,
minutes. Yes,
Your Honor, I know you want to
I
take a
didn't
break,
realize
but the
when I'd
prosecution
seen
still has the right to
the
cross-examine.
little bit of I did when
my-
it's actually
thank
happened
you,
a couple
Special
months ago.
Counsel
I
Alan
didn't
Ng.
realize how
Yes,
good Mr. Blackwood was.
Cross-examination from the prosecution on everything we've just heard, and then we will move to a break. Thank you, Mr. Ng.
Excellent. So we just jump in?
Do you want
Yes,
me to go
please
first, Shane? Or
proceed,
you...
Mr. Montgomery, Mr. Connors,
Actually, I got to go first last time. Let's let Tom go first, and I'll try to clean him up.
Mr. Connors.
All right. Mr. Willie, can I call you that, or should I call you that?
Yes.
Mr. Willie, compared the loose plan to the Marvel Universe, and Thanos' role in the Marvel Universe, which I'm not so sure is a fair,
this count is dealing with mismanagement of both
comparable
sides.
assessment to an
Business
entire
and
franchise to
creative.
one storyline. Because I'm curious as to why you think we should draw that comparison here, and at the end of the day, why is that relevant? I guess is my best question.
I would argue the relevance. Oh, well, okay. Let me tackle the first part of your question. Is why I decided to use that part of my argument. Is the fact is that Marvel itself has been considered this generation's version of Star Wars, and even then, with their established characters, there was still a level of letting the creators, letting the filmmakers create and play in the sandbox of Marvel, and even alter characters. For example, like Thanos, like in in his comic iteration, his motivation is far different than the one that was portrayed in Infinity War. My point is that even though Feige claims to have everything organized out, there is still, it's loosely organized. According to Whedon, it was loosely organized out, and there was an allowance of leadway for the filmmakers to create. The reason I compare that with the sequel trilogy is that, look, let's say, for example, of what Mr. Montgomery pointed out, that KK told Bryan Johnson to make his own film. He was allowed to do.
Oh, that may be one of the IPs they put on trial
create his own
eventually.
film. Now, is the fact that it's a divisive film.
Film Threat Craig's
that's
Court
a
is
different
planning
debate
on
than the
putting
fact that's different.
a lot of
from
different IPs
malfeasance
on trial. The next one after this is Star Trek.
Aspect.
Okay. I guess I'm failing to see your point here. Maybe I should ask you this a different way. On the whole point of your comparison to, George not having a plan for the original trilogy, leading into the prequel trilogy, which you kind of tried to connect with that, and bringing up books and other media. I got to ask you, do you like listening to the radio in your car?
Yes.
Now, you do know that the first cars that were invented didn't have radio, right?
Yes.
And those came along later in different, what would you consider like drafts of a vehicle, right? And every day or every year we get new drafts of these vehicles, and some things work, some things don't work. And over time, they excise the things that don't work, and we keep the things that work, and that's how we got to modern vehicles, right?
Correct.
So yeah, and in that, they built on those things that were pre-established. And of course, like I said, that original vehicle didn't have a radio. I'm sure it didn't have air conditioning or windshield wipers as well.
Neither seatbelts.
Exactly, but eventually they did. And
didn't even have doors
at this point now. I guess my question to you is, why do you think that the inventor of the car should be brought up or responsible for anything that the individual who created the windshield wiper would do? Like if a windshield wiper were to kill somebody, why would the inventor of the car be responsible for that? Wouldn't you think that the manufacturer of the windshield wiper would be instead?
Well, what I would argue with that is that while Mr. Ford invented the car, after a while, his invention, his creation, was allowed to permutate, and so we got different types of vehicles, like motorcycles, like seat belts in cars, radios, etc. So my point is the fact is that it's Disney is the creator of the sequel trilogy. They are now the owners of Star Wars. It's no longer George Lucas. Just like how after the patent ran out for the car was no longer owned by Henry Ford.
Technically, Ford didn't invent the car.
Okay, I guess here's the
He
thing though,
invented
is
automation
once the windshield
of the
wiper
process of
worked,
building cars.
they didn't really change it too much over time,
forget the
right?
guy's name, but
they
the
kept
guy
it the
over in
same. They
Europe
moved on to
actually
other
invented the
things,
car.
right? So I guess I'm just failing to see why the inventor of the car, or in this case, the inventor of the franchise, George Lucas, seems to be the defense wants to put him on trial when it's his creation that was killed. So I guess I'm failing to understand where the argument is coming in here, and a lot of your basis for your argument. Sorry about that, but I'll turn it over to Shane at that point. Thank you.
No, you're fine. I would argue is the fact that the sequel, that Star Wars is not dead, per se. And also I would argue is the fact is that it is, why should we hold Disney to a different standard than we would for George Lucas, who also was working on that sequel trilogy?
Well, Willie, if you don't mind, I think the analogy to the car.
Aaron, are you saying cars are dead for you?
Because the car is something that the end user can actually manipulate and use the way they want to use it. And this is akin to the idea of a fandom. The movie franchise has no life unless it has a fandom. And the car has no life, has no commercial value unless there's an end user, and that end user is willing to do things with the car. And so at the end of the day,
yeah, I didn't think you were. I just thought it was kind of funny that
trial. At the end of the day, that there are
seem like
the people like myself who are not particularly happy with the products that Disney has produced over the last 10, 15 years, are willing to sit here and have this discussion in hopes that we get a better Star Wars is proof positive that Star Wars isn't dead. And again, the whole automobile thing really kind of fails as an analogy, again, because the end user is, there's all kinds of people that are not car manufacturers that actually do stuff for cars.
That's it, folks. You heard it here. First on Penguin Thoughts. Officially, cars are dead. Just kidding. Going back to horse and buggy days? That would be messed up. Of course, penguins don't really drive cars. We fly spaceships. Anyway, continuing on. I just had to stop and say something.
I have windshield wipers, for example, that have been improved upon since the first windshield wiper, specifically to be able to wipe away water in a much more efficient way. And that particular company has nothing to do with the company that produced my car. So it's not a really good analogy to use.
Well, let's use your analogy, Father, if I can. And thank you for that's. I love that you say you want Star Wars to be alive. We all do. We want it to continue. And I'd like to thank my esteemed colleague, Mr. Connors. I would like to quickly refute some of your evidence that you came with, Father. When you talked about the box office results being, I would counter that the box office is an indication of the mismanagement of the franchise. When you consider that the domestic box office for episode 7 was $936 million, and then when episode 8 came, it dropped by a third. And then when episode 9 came, it dropped by, I would say 40% from the first movie. The continued dropping of the box office was an indication that fans also felt that Star Wars had mishandled the Disney franchise. And Your Honor, I leave it with that.
We're going to take a brief recess, and then we will open up the floor to open debate. We will also be bringing questions from those in the jury. So please don't leave the channel. I recommend that you grab a refreshing beverage, use the facilities, and we will be back in 2 minutes. And I want to please remind those in the jury to listen to all the evidence from both sides before coming to a conclusion.
Yeah, so I agree.
Please keep an open mind now to take care of any personal business.
What I was trying to do is stay independent so I could make the movies I wanted to make. But
now I'm going to take a break after his break because I need longer than 2 minutes because I got to go to the little penguin's room. But I thought I'd watch these first, then we'll pause and go for a break and then come back.
But at the same time, I was sort of fighting the corporate system, which I didn't like. And I'm not happy with the fact that corporations have taken over the film industry. But now I found myself being the head of a corporation. So there's a certain irony there, is that I have become the very thing that I was trying to avoid, which is basically what part of Star Wars is about. That is Darth Vader. He becomes the very thing that he's trying to protect himself against.
Because I feel like Star Wars is very like patriarchal, and clothes make the man toxic. Yes, yes. Just because you're a stormtrooper in the Empire doesn't mean you can't look fabulous. The first order of business must be uniform, and uniform doesn't mean it all needs to look the same. Accessorize. Long live the matriarchy.
Oh, pink stormtroopers would kind of stand out in the middle of a forest, wouldn't they?
Hi, I'm Luke Toothbrusher. Gosh, Luke.
Luke
Brush twice every day, and even if you enter a danger zone, Signal's fluoride keeps on protecting.
Yeah, I want to see these old Star Wars commercials that they're putting in here. I didn't get to last time.
As a toy seller, Star Wars is unequaled. I have about 20.
Yeah, that's true. Like, white ones do stand out, but you'll see, like, if you remember correctly, in like Return of the Jedi, they did have some, like biker scouts that their armor looked more camouflaged, even though some were wearing pure white as well. I almost wonder if that isn't like a regimental thing, though. You know, they were a military force, so maybe certain ones that were like commandos or something like that. So I don't know. Anyway.
20, 25, you know.
Which one?
You know, the main characters like Chewbacca, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, all of those, you know.
How many of the Star Wars characters do you have at home?
About 10.
About 10? How
About
about
10.
you? Do you have them too?
I have 3. I don't have none, really.
You don't have any yet?
I'm planning to get some.
You are? Which ones you want?
All of them.
Star Wars toys have been the top sellers in boys' action toys for 6 years straight.
Oh, wow.
Some of the toys are action toys.
I
If your
had
child
one of
gets
those
one, you may have to take
lightsabers.
it away with force.
It was just basically it didn't retract or anything.
You're gonna
And
hit
you
me with
moved
the,
it, it was like hollow and made a
Children are
whistling
buying the
noise
toys,
when
of
you moved
course, but so are older investors. You're buying Star Wars toys.
Right. In a couple of years, they'll be worth a lot of dough, like a lot of other things.
You're buying them strictly as an investment.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, it looks like maybe he's going to stop there. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and take like a good 4 or 5 minute break here. And I encourage you to, if you need to take a break, yep, stand, stretch, get you something to drink or something like that. Or slap your neighbor with a fish. Tell them you care about them. And anyway, we'll be back. So hang tight. And we'll be back for more Star Wars on Trial. See you in about 4 or 5 minutes or so. Okay, I'm back, campers. And I hope you had that opportunity to get up and stretch. And we will get back into this. Thanks, Tracy. And let's see here. Let's continue on. Questions from the chat. No, we're going to skip that part. Not that I don't care about what the comments of people watching this were. I do. But I'm, for the sake of rewatching all this, I'm just really interested in watching the trial itself and not the super chats. But I encourage you, if you're really interested in what the super chats have to say, the link to this video is down in my description, and you can go watch it and go to it yourself, because as you can see, there's little chapter markers here, and that's how I'm skipping. And actually, when I first did this, I didn't notice that there were chapter markers when I first started doing all this. All right, so let's see here. Okay, so now
we have been a bit formal on the rules for open debate. Those rules are out the window. I would like to see some passionate debate. I want to see people who can handle the truth. And a quick comment here: Yumi in the movies, Galactic Star
no
Cruiser
problem,
and Galaxy's
Karen.
Edge, both being themed after the new trilogy.
Say hey to the kiddo
and not the
for
original trilogy is all the evidence you need for negligence.
May the fish be with
Perhaps
you.
a comment to keep in mind. It is now open debate on count three and count three and actually any count
Tracy, you
in
can't
the trial.
handle the
Open
truth.
debate,
Exactly.
which will go for the
Now
next
be safe.
30 to 40 minutes. Anyone who would like to begin?
I actually would like to begin for the defense. I have a question for you. I have 3 strikes, and I believe this is the reason why count 3 100% is proven here. Bob Iger's choice to create an impossible release schedule is the first strike. Every 2 years putting out a Star Wars movie, it just doesn't work. You need 3 years. Strike number 2 is Kathleen not hiring a Star Wars expert to help advise and guide her team. And of course, strike 3 was not having a unifying vision that would properly tell the story in a way that respects the first 6 movies that came before it.
I would. Oh, sorry.
No need to apologize, Mr. Willie. Jump right in.
I would argue
all formal decorum. This is open debate.
Okay, I would argue for your counts as such. Number 1, with the release schedule, Marvel was able to release at the time when they bought Lucasfilm 2 movies a year, and were able to make money. So the fact that they did every other year, it was something doable. Number 3, they did have an expert in Star Wars. They had, now love him or hate him, Pablo Hidalgo wrote wrote books on the dictionary of Star Wars, or on the lore of Star Wars. Huh? Pardon?
Yeah, the show Bible, is that what you're talking about?
No.
Show
He
Bible?
wrote books. No, he wrote books like of the dictionary of Star Wars, or and I think he wrote another one about the lore of Star Wars. So, in theory, they did have experts of Star Wars.
Well, Kevin Feige was an expert on Marvel, right, and also a fan of the product. So the reason they could get out multiple films in such a quick amount of time was that he was managing it from the front. Hidalgo wasn't an upfront person managing this. Wasn't his right-hand man. There was no person to give guidance to make this thing go quicker.
Think he was actually
they're also
involved
working on a
in
franchise that hasn't been produced in a very long time, that needs extraordinarily amount of time instead of a superhero franchise. So I would just say that not having a second, a person like a Kevin Feige to do that would make it impossible for them to do it every 2 years. J.J. Abrams also did both of the Star Trek movies before handing over the third one. So the fact that he handed over the second one, I think, is an indication that he didn't have enough time to do 2 movies. If he's doing 7, there's not enough time to do 8, because it has to be written, it has to be prepared, and he's still producing 7. So I just think that makes it an impossibility.
And not only that, to my colleague's point, when you're already producing a film before the last one has come out, you have no idea what kind of feedback you're going to get on it. Granted, they got very positive feedback from The Force Awakens. So I don't know if they would have went down the road of allowing Rian Johnson to deviate so much had that been the case. And by the time we get to episode 9, the box office had dwindled so much and so bad that we have not had a movie since then. That was a point that was made just recently in our super chat session here. So yeah, I'm curious as to your guys' response to that, because and comparing it to the Marvel Universe, I don't know if you really want to keep going with that, because what happened to the Marvel Universe after a little while? It crushed under the weight of itself. And here we are now at a point where the Marvel Universe is on the brink of in the same place that Star Wars did it, but in half the time.
Well, I would like to make a meta argument that is not necessarily specific to Count 3, but is specific to the whole idea of Star Wars being dead. And one of the things that I hope that people come away from this trial, whether this ends up finding Disney guilty or not, is we need to understand that there is this idea called Star Wars. And that idea called Star Wars is not something that is wholly owned by Disney. Yes, they have the legal right to produce products that have Star Wars stamped on it, okay? But they don't have the power to tell us what is and isn't Star Wars. That's the fandom. And if we walk away from this trial, any way, shape, or form, feeling that we are beholden to Star Wars, to Disney for anything Star Wars, whether it's another movie, it's another game, it's another book, whatever.
I'm not seeing where he's going with this.
Because they are the ones that want us to believe that they control everything Star Wars. And I want everyone to understand that the reason that I'm on the defense is because I'm here to defend the fandom and defend our ability to keep this franchise alive, regardless of what Disney ultimately does. And I want to point to previous franchises that live on despite the fact that their IPs have been in bad places. Star Trek got a movie franchise because of the fandom. Firefly got a movie because of the fandom. Star Wars exists because of the fandom. And as long as we, as the fandom, continue to hold the flame, continue to tell whoever owns the IP, whether it's Disney or somebody else, that we want good Star Wars stories and that we will pay good money for Star Wars stories, then Star Wars lives. And regardless of what Disney does, as long as we do our part in this thing that's known as Star Wars, and part of that is what we're doing here.
Well, I love the defense's positivity and outlook on this. And, that's great. But at the end of the day, business is business and life is and death are what we're arguing here. And you can buy something, you can take it, and it is yours at that point. And Disney had that right to do whatever they wanted with it. And what they did with it is murder it, sadly. And that's the argument we have here. Because if there was a future for the franchise, it was dead with them.
Okay. And art, as I've made the argument before,
so
art
beauty's
is
in the eye of the
something
beholder is what he's arguing.
that exists in a vacuum. Art exists because it has an audience.
I will say this much. For me personally, regardless of if I think current Star Wars is good or not, it, to a certain extent, I do agree with the fact that it is art and it's in the eye of the beholder. If you're someone out there that watches the sequel trilogies or anything like, the stuff that Disney's been putting out there for Star Wars, and you love it, that's great, and you enjoy it, more power to you. I think this is going from an approach of whether or not what was Disney's intent when they purchased the Star Wars IP And just like he's talking about the fandoms here, the fandom menace is that's why we're kind of all here in the first place, is because we all agree or disagree on how Star Wars is today. Just like we did when George released the prequels. There was a lot of fighting and discussion about some people liked them, some people didn't like them. That's just fandom. Because at the end of the day, I would like to think that we can disagree agreeably. And if you are someone that loves current day Star Wars, great. More power to you. Keep watching it. Keep loving it. I'm all for that. If you're someone that doesn't, you have the right to feel that way as well. Tracy says the serious beginning of the end was Jar Jar Binks. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, Jar Jar Binks, I think, was an okay character, but his appeal was to try to make Star Wars more kid-friendly. Because my two boys, my goslings, grew up with the prequel trilogy. And even though I introduced them to the original trilogy, my youngest really did like Jar Jar there for a little bit. Of course, he was also like, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 at the time. I forget how old he was when the I'd have to look and see when the Phantom Menace came out to let you know. But nevertheless, I think it was George's intention, this humble little Star Wars penguin opinion, that Jar Jar was a character in there to try to appeal to kids. Simply put. I mean, it's like the same thing as, I honestly believe that's why R2-D2 and C-3PO were in the original trilogy. Actually, have been in all the movies. And why they are universally loved, because they appeal to pretty much everybody. And R2-D2 is still my favorite character. I think it's because he is so got a very intricate background of a story, in my opinion. There's just so much, there's a little bit of mystery in there, because you never know, with watching those movies, you never know what R2 is going to be up to. I like that about him. But he always has this pinch for getting in trouble. And that speaks to how this little penguin is. I like getting in trouble too sometimes. I admit it openly and freely. Anyway, let's get back to it.
And the way that audience interacts with the art is determinative of what happens to that art. Okay.
And I'm not going to argue about art, because that's obviously in the eye of the beholder. But I will say that I will give you credit earlier for saying that.
And the beholder is the audience.
Yeah, and I will say this:
ultimately going to decide whether or not Star Wars dies.
And I totally agree with you, and I'll give you that point. And I will also agree earlier that maybe my car analogy wasn't the greatest, but I think there's a point that needs to be made here with that windshield wiper. What that windshield wiper was an improvement on the vehicle. It wasn't something that took away from it. It wasn't something that destroyed the car. Disney had every opportunity in the world to improve Star Wars, to build upon what was there, regardless of what state it was in at that time. Instead of building upon and nurturing it, it decided to malnourish it, bleed the blood dry, and leave it to die a riddled, dead mess, where today a Star Wars show or movie cannot even muster enough energy to get people excited on Disney Plus. And we are sadly at this point where they're just basically cutting pieces off the corpse and selling it to us.
I would like a court graphic of Tom's last statement there, Mr. Connor's last statement, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
That's pretty close.
Great, thank you.
Blackwood.
That's right,
I'm
Johnson.
seeing that in my nightmares now.
That's messed up.
So I also want to make the point that, if, in fact, we do decide that Disney is indeed guilty of all of these charges, at the end of the day, does that really do anybody any good? The point that we as the fandom have to make to whoever owns the IPs of our beloved franchises is that these franchises exist because we
cutting pieces off the
made them
corpse.
exist.
That's
we were
graphical.
the ones who spent that money.
What a visual.
Or the ones who gave them the money in order to make these things real. And we need to be clear as a fandom to whoever owns these IPs that we demand better. And so again, that's on us. That's not on Disney.
Well, the good news is, Father Tom, I do believe, I love what you're saying because I feel the exact same way about Star Trek. But the reality is that, you know, the fandom does feel the way it does because the fact that they have failed to, you know, they've mishandled the franchise. If they hadn't mishandled the franchise, you wouldn't be having open court critics like we have here. We wouldn't have so much criticism. We would have more people at the box office. We would have more Disney movies. The reality is that we don't have these things because they have failed.
I think that is a fair point.
And it is important that us as a fandom that we use. And I think you've actually done the best job of helping the prosecution today, sir. I believe you've said that we need to, as a fandom, to speak up and to, you know, be true to what we believe and what we love, and we need to use our dollars and our voices and to show them what we like and what we don't like, and show up to the things that are good and don't show up to the things that aren't. And until Disney can do that,
it's just like being
Disney
sick. You have
failed.
symptoms that let you know
But
something's
failure
not
and
right.
negligence are two different things.
The fandom
Well,
has
and I
kind of
think
fallen
another
away
thing to your
from
point,
things.
sir, if I can
then
add this to the
it does
evidence,
kind of indicate
not to
that
get too formal
something's
again,
not going
but it was brought
the
up
way
by
it
in
should.
the audience that Star Wars used to be the third highest grossing franchise of all times when it comes to these kind of IPs. Now this recently came out, and it has been bumped
Mr.
down
Montgomery
to
says there.
4, and this is when they've had more movies and toys than they've ever had in the history of ever. So if there really was a fandom there to support it, they're not there anymore. I don't think. I don't know if you can add that to the screen there, Alan, or not. There you go. As you see here, this is a recent release here
Wow,
from
that's
Title
really
Max.
small.
And yeah, Star
Okay, there
Wars
we
is
go.
down there at 4th place, and it went from 3rd to 4th, and that's when it had more things added to the franchise, which should make it go
Hello,
up, and it
Kitty
did
is
not.
second.
Sadly. To our Winnie
Hello,
the Pooh, which
Kitty.
has had very little to nothing come out in the last 10 to 20 years, is
These
still
are for, like, toy
still
sales.
over top of it. That's pretty bad. And Mickey Mouse as well has overtaken it.
Just to be clear,
video
being
games,
the
trading
fourth
cards,
top-
all that kind of stuff.
Now it's 5th, but
Fourth,
technically, but yeah.
Not surprised that
top
Pokemon's
grossing
top that
franchise in
list.
the world is dead. Just to be clear.
Unfortunately, I think this is. I know where you're coming from with your argument, but the fact that it was at that place before Star Wars was taken over by Disney, and the fact that it has now been demoted when there's actually more movies, more shows,
Pokemon's
more
a
merchandise
worldwide
than there
hit.
ever has been before.
It really is.
I think that's all the proof you need that this franchise is dead, and Star Wars killed it.
Mishandled. And
mishandled. And it was died due to mismanagement.
I do know when
and
I was growing
negligence
up,
at the same time.
Star Wars
You had several
toys
parties
and video
that
games
went
and
out of their
comic
way
books
to do
and
their own
everything,
thing and were selfish.
That would not
And
been.
you had other parties maybe out of negligence
It
or
wouldn't have
trying to
been
appease
fifth.
others with
It'd
no
been up
real
there at the top
malice. I will
because
concede that, but that does not change the facts.
that was a
That, as
big,
you
big
pointed
thing
out,
when I was growing up.
a franchise with a legacy that goes through generations.
Anytime anybody in the
has
neighborhood got a
basically
new
been
Star
killed
Wars toy,
in less
everybody
time than
wanted to see it.
than it's been around. It's just insane.
Well, there are ups and downs in every IP.
More
and
so
every
than anything
franchise,
else.
And
I
there
mean,
are other
just-
franchises that have survived pretty horrible runs.
Yeah, I'm not surprised,
I
Tracy.
would give you Godzilla,
And
for
that
example.
right there should indicate that
Godzilla
something has
is
changed.
one of
Something's
my
different.
favorite IPs, and there was a run there where the movies that got produced were really bad, but it's still around today. It's still producing really good movies, really fun movies,
And I would counter with that when we had the 98 Godzilla. What did Toho do? They turned around and counterbalanced it with their own franchise to reinvigorate it again because they saw the damage that was inflicted. Disney didn't do that. When they saw the damage that was inflicted, they continued to bludgeon it to death instead of try to revive it.
I love the MonsterVerse.
So,
oh man,
this brings up an interesting
matter of fact. I just got through watching the other day the Godzilla -1 trailer.
I bring
that is going to be a cool movie.
Court experience from the RPG world, which is a little bit different than the movie world, but nonetheless, I think is analogous. One of the games that I play is Dungeons and Dragons, but it's not Dungeons and Dragons because there's these things in the world called retroclones, which emulate Dungeons and Dragons from 1977, 1981, 1984, etc. And these are made by fans for fans, and they keep the game alive. Okay. And when it comes to things like Star Trek, there are plenty of media out there that have made things that are Star Trek but aren't Star Trek. The Orville and Galaxy Quest are Star Trek shows and movies, but they're not Star Trek. We, as the fandom and as creators and creatives, can do the same thing with Star Wars. There are plenty of things about Star Wars that are universal that we can, show and demonstrate that that's Star Wars, even though legally it's not.
Yeah, Zack Snyder's coming out with a thing. It's going to be coming out on Netflix called Rebel Moon.
And do it.
It was actually a story that he pitched originally to Disney to make a Star Wars film, and they weren't interested, so he decided to make it himself.
And in fact, that has recently happened in the RPG world.
Yeah, Orville kind of.
Wizards of the Coast has been put in a very uncomfortable position.
It's got the original Star Trek feel to it, but you're right. It does have an amalgamation of other sci-fi series out there. It's kind of like a
have forced Wizards of the Coast to try to
lack of a better word, tongue-in-cheek thing. I think it's more like a
going to be a really interesting ride in the next several years to see what happens.
Viewpoint, like Galaxy Quest was.
And that's
good,
not due to, and in large part, this kind of falls on us, not Disney, because we need to be better stewards. We need to be more careful with.
That's because of Seth MacFarlane, who's a big Trekkie.
And that's admirable. And
he actually appeared in
if I get a dog that looks
Star
just
Trek
like my
episode.
old dog, I can love it just as much as my old dog, but it still doesn't make it my old dog. And fans can make new things all day long. That still doesn't make it Star Wars. And I'd love to hear more from Willie or my colleague here on this as well.
I would say is that part of the problem with the case when you're arguing negligence or malfeasance is that you, in order to definitively prove it, you have to have their financials, and unfortunately, we are not privy to those financials of Lucasfilm. So I mean, it's kind of a hard case to make without that. So I mean, we're just kind of fumbling around with mainly emotional arguments.
But what we do have proof, though, that they intentionally went against George Lucas's intended vision for the sequel trilogy. We do know that it was their intent to shift it towards a female-oriented saga instead of it being inclusive of everybody, or basically in line with the more classic form of the franchise. And, I mean, yourself has said that we're not here to appease to 50-year-old fans. And I think that was the point where they intentionally, what it may be second-degree murder or however you want to put it, it sure ain't homicide, it's murder. They intended to do something here that changed Star Wars as a whole, and it did not work out for them in the end.
That does not mean they didn't kill it. And you attack
that's what happened
those
at the
that
end
are
of the
watching.
day.
I would argue. Oh,
okay.
Sorry. I would.
That's never good. Attacking the fans.
The idea of the Force is female. I agree, it's a bad idea, but it's also
a very quick way to get people to stop watching.
Many years was making money. outrage marketing is a thing, and it works. The Colin Kaepernick thing with Nike increased their sales by 31%.
Yeah,
and they made
I don't
$6
like the
billion
outrage
by creating
marketing.
controversy. So the idea that the Disney is willing to stir controversy as a PR move to try to make money on their new franchise quickly is not negligence. It's a business strategy. One that I disagree with, one that I don't think worked, but it is a business
Yeah, I
strategy.
think you win more
Well, if they
more
had,
flies with
at
honey
least
than you do vinegar.
pulled it off. So I mean, if they wanted the Force to be female, that's fine. But the problem is they turned Rey into a Mary Sue, and you cannot have a character who can come in and just do everything that your legacy characters could do without having any knowledge or study or expertise, and just can magically do these things. And I think anyone would agree that with their head screwed on straight, that's just a stupid thing to do. I mean, we're talking about mishandling the franchise. I mean, for the love of God, anybody who watched that movie the first time through and stopped and looked and went, how the hell did all that happen? I've been watching Star Wars for how many decades? How?
Now, see, I honestly believe 100% that that Rey could have been a really good character if they had treated her like what they should do with every good story and have a hero's journey. And, actually having to go through a process like Luke did or Anakin or anybody else in the previous other 6 films that had a story to get to where they are. That they all of a sudden are the master of everything. That they just, never flown a starship, but all of a sudden can fly the Millennium Falcon like they're a professional, weaving in and out of an old destroyed Star Destroyer. That part, I mean, it was cool looking, but it just made it took me out of the immersion of Star Wars. Like Matrix style. It's like all of a sudden you downloaded all the knowledge you needed and you're good to go. But that's not Star Wars. That's the Matrix. That's the problem. Didn't have the right payoff. Anyway, continuing on.
How the hell did that happen? And why isn't there someone there to say, hey guys, why are we doing this? This doesn't make any sense. How does Rey automatically know how to use the Force once she meets Kylo Ren? How does she immediately duplicate all the things that he can do after years of studying and meditating and practicing? I mean, it's just, they mishandled the franchise because they thought that fans would show up no matter what. It's the same problem we have in Hollywood now with most of our IPs. They just believe with a lot of these franchises that people are going to show up anyways. So they're going to continue to slowly push the peg towards a greater audience. The reason why the Force is female is because half of the population is female. And they know that the majority of the excited people about Star Wars are male. And so they already said, hey, we already got those actors. We already got them. So let's go ahead and just now we're going to go get the ladies. Okay, that's what we're going to do. And that's exactly what they did. And they failed, and it was mishandled because it turned out to be shitty Star Wars.
I just saw in the chat a comment about Finn and how the fans wanted Finn to be the new hero. Another business decision that Disney made, and again, one that at the time was a good one, was that Hollywood was making bank in China. And one of the things that China does not like is, unfortunately, people with darker color skin. And so, as we saw with those posters, Disney made the business decision to de-emphasize Finn. And so, in order to placate to an audience that they thought they were going to make billions of dollars from, they made certain choices. Are those negligent choices or just bad choices? Again, all of this comes down to business. And at the time, Hollywood was courting China. And so there were certain business decisions that needed to be made.
Yeah, Disney has always been trying to court
Is that
China.
neglect? Is that mismanagement? Or is it just bad decisions? And I would argue that it was just bad decisions. And certainly,
But isn't bad decisions mishandling? I mean, basically, doesn't that
you
indicate that it was mishandled?
A bad decision is not necessarily mishandling. Okay? There are plenty of decisions that you can make that are bad that could end up being end up being good due to the outcome happening regardless. So no, I don't think it's mismanagement. Mismanagement would.
Would you say that they succeeded with the franchise? So if we say, let's say it wasn't mishandled. So let's say it was handled properly. So what are the indicators that would say it was handled properly? It had great box office numbers. The fans are super happy. The story makes sense and everybody had a good time. Is there an argument that that's the case, or would we say that the overwhelming majority of people would say it was mishandled?
Well, I would argue is that look at it from Disney's point of view, is that expanding the fan base from their original target audience of males who are in their 40s or 50s to younger audiences, to female audiences, to China, which is not normally or overseas audiences, I should say, to expand Star Wars. Would that be a good decision or a bad decision? Because what they're doing, while maybe not being necessarily successful, they are trying to bring Star Wars to a more wider audience.
But if it's not Star Wars done properly, then is it Star Wars?
I would argue. Well, I mean that's part of the gag is what is Star Wars? Because I'll be honest, even Lucas with the prequels had trouble of defining what is Star Wars, because he made the Jedi's just a bunch of people wielding lightsabers, and that's not necessarily what Star Wars is at least from the original trilogy.
Yes.
So
we had
Blackwood.
Han Solo in the first.
What is that? Vader holding
that
a glass of blue milk?
Being part of a hokey religion, and where was the religion in the prequels? I didn't see any. So, what is Star Wars is a legitimate question, and one of the ways that you have to answer that question has nothing to do with Disney.
Well, George, I think, gets to define it, right,
but I don't think they're Star Wars. I mean, I don't think you'd find anybody who would say that the Christmas special should, be Star Wars.
Here we go.
Well, George would like to destroy it as well. What did he say? He'd love to go around if he had the time or the money and destroy every copy of the special.
Yeah, on the point of negligence and mismanagement, I think I have at least one main exhibit leading into others to add here to this.
We don't talk about the Christmas story.
Alan,
the Christmas special.
Basically, that is Kathy herself is generally out of the loop, it seems, and she's supposed to be the head of Lucasfilm and the producer of these movies. And there was a time where she didn't even know anything about the whole Carrie Fisher business in episode 9, and Carrie Fisher's brother even had to correct her on it. I mean, so that tells me she's not even paying attention to what she's supposed to be paying attention to. On top of let's jump ahead to another point where Miss Kennedy wasn't very observant of what was going on. She let an Obi-Wan Kenobi show go to the point where they had to rewrite it because it was too much like a show they already had in Mandalorian. I mean, to me, that is just gross negligence at this point. You have the person who's supposed to be in charge of this thing who can't even keep track of anything and doesn't even know what's going on half the time, it seems like.
Well, I would argue is which unfortunately the article doesn't point out, and unfortunately we may never actually know, is how exactly was the Obi-Wan series like The Mandalorian. And
it says in there that it was like the Cub and Lone Wolf aspect.
Cub and Lone Wolf aspect, and I mean you look at the Obi-Wan series, and you can kind of and fans understandably railed against the fact that, like, oh wait, why isn't he watching Luke Skywalker? Which was his whole point of being on Tatooine. So, I mean, they, in kind of excising that part and trying to make that part different from Mandalorian, they ended up making something that the fans hate. I would argue maybe that it depends on what the script says and how the story went out, of how much similar or dissimilar, or maybe, who knows, maybe they should have just ran with it anyway, even if it was similar to Mandalorian aspect anyway. It's kind of hard to say without being either in the room or having the scripts on hand, to be like we got with Duel of the Fates, the episode 9. So, I mean, it's part of the problem. I mean, that's also part of the problem with, like, how you said, how you had earlier, the people that
Duel of Fates is not episode 9.
Exactly what were their stories and treatments like?
Not sure what he's talking about.
Could it be that the Star Wars we got was the best that they were able to get because the talent pool was maybe not up to snuff?
I can't believe turning Obi-Wan Kenobi into the Reva television show is the best that they can do. You know, and I will venture that there's people sitting here in this audience who could walk into a writer's room and produce better product than came out of that Obi-Wan series. So I don't know if that's a good argument that there's not the talent available. Is there the desire to give the fandom what it is that they want? And have they yet figured out that they don't have an endless supply of money to which pull from? And at some point, there's going to be a reckoning for what they've decided to do.
I think Disney is getting that reckoning right now.
There's a lot of
so much
people that have sent super
debt.
chats, and on some comments. I'd like to get to those, but real briefly, I think it's important that we, no matter where you stand on either side of the argument, I know we all love Han Solo, so in memoriam to the character of Han Solo.
Didn't make sense to me.
It's not a very respectful way of putting that, but let's
No,
let's
it's
move
not.
to your comment. That's I know the reference, Mr. Connors. Comments are too tired for two. Says Sims 4-pack Journey
we're
to
switching over
Batu.
to
Also,
last final thoughts here. Because like I said, I skipped the super chats.
With my point, going to my point is that George Lucas was the creator of Star Wars, and he was playing it by ear, and he managed to be lucky to make a successful franchise. Disney, having bought Star Wars, was now the de facto creator of Star Wars, for the upcoming for foreseeable future. That's what I was trying to.
What is Mr. Blackwood drawing now?
Them kind of playing it a little bit by ear and letting the creatives be creative.
Mickey's losing it.
Is a risk, not necessarily.
I'm glad they highlight him sometimes.
How well they succeeded in that risk, that's
it's
up for
really
debate.
Cool just to watch him draw the stuff he does.
You know, taste is subjective, but they made a calculated risk. And
Vader holding a glass of
that's
blue
my
milk.
point, and that's my point.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Charlie Day. I mean Willie. Someone called you Charlie Day.
Yeah, I know. I'm not. It's not the first time I've heard that.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Not a bad thing. So a couple more things here. I'd like to thank our mods today. Lord Thoth, Gritteren Masters, Latino Slant, Paulie from Latino Slant, and Mexican Iron Man. Thank you to our mods. Keeping the jury polite. Toxic Dust 13 says, I'd love for Nick Rekieta, Joe Good Logic, and Andrew Legal Mindset to show up to get in on this.
Yeah,
there
those
are
are
going to be
all
some shocking guests
lawyers
that will be
that are
joining
part of this
in the
law
coming weeks
tube
for
thing.
Critics Court. Court, if we go by all the counts, will run through the beginning of San Diego Comic-Con, the third week of July, when we will render a verdict. That may, in fact, happen live at San Diego Comic-Con in San Diego. We will keep you up to date on that. Also want to thank Mr. Todd Blackwood today, our court sketch artist. Thank you, sir, for your renderings.
It's got blue milk all over his helmet.
We have Darth Vader there. I saw earlier a sketch of Vader. I saw a sketch of Mickey Mouse. Please follow Mr. Blackwood on social
I just
media.
don't understand
Links are
that.
in the description, and you can go to at Blackwood_PDX. That's well, there you are, Charlie.
Yeah,
Day.
right. San Diego
There you
Comic
go.
Con being in San Diego.
Oh, Ryan Johnson. Sort of an
Imagine
amalgam.
that.
Johnson, yeah.
A little bit of an amalgam there.
That's great.
So there you go. Thank you. Would anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Anyone else like to throw in a plug for your upcoming projects and events?
All I can say is, come over and check out the Popcast Unleashed every Thursday and Monday. We have Raw Rant, which, our judge has been on the show several times. We appreciate him. And just thanks for having us on today.
I don't watch the podcast guys all the time, but I do watch them every now and then.
Star Wars.
I just want to tell everybody you can find me at Midnight Sedge After Dark. But if you expect me to be like this over there, you're going to be sadly mistaken. Because
oh, and I want to remind people, if you
this is an act. I'm just a Southern lawyer.
If you go to the Film Threat YouTube channel, we've been running these caption contests. I think you will be incredibly amused.
That's potato
if you go to
candy.
the community tab on the Film Threat YouTube channel, there is a beautiful rendering of by Mr. Blackwood, and the captions I did lol several times. So we've been posting some of Todd's artwork.
I would assume those are probably still up there on
Father
the Film
Dave,
Threat YouTube channel.
would you
Let
like
me
to
go
plug
check those out offline.
your project?
Off stream.
Nothing to plug, but I do want to thank everybody for doing this. This is fun. I think it's also necessary. I think the
I
fact
will
that
say
we're
I
able to
do
get
like Father
together
Dave.
and have these kinds of
He
discussions
seems to
is
really
important
put a
because
lot
it
of
shows,
logical
in
thinking
fact,
into his
that
arguments.
the fandom
Even if
is
I don't
alive
agree with everything
and
he's
well,
saying,
and we are not
it's still very well
allowing
laid out.
any entity to divide us in our love.
And between
of
the
Star
two
Wars.
prosecutors,
So
I
thanks
do like
everybody
Mr. Montgomery
who's
better
here
than I do
and
Mr.
everybody
Connors.
who's been commenting and everybody who has participated.
Even though
You're great.
they all seem to.
Thank you, Father. Willie.
Yeah, I will
Be
first of all, I'd like
unified.
to echo Father Dave's sentiments by thanking Film Threat for having me on. Thank you for the audience for putting in their thoughts. And for me on my channel, I'm working on making Assault an animated pilot for Assault on Castle Dracula. It's part 2 of the pilot. And I'm working on some other shorts as well, since I'm ADD and nuts and like to give myself a lot of work. And you can also find me on Willie the Monkey King's music channel. I got some music that I made, and even some
I don't
live
really know
stream,
him.
even some videos going through songs that I had created, but for one
Never
reason or
watched any of
another,
his content.
just didn't seem to be the light of day to put on a video.
Mr. Ng.
Yes, join us for the live stream on Friday. We'll be talking about The Little Mermaid and asking the question, is Walt Disney Company murdering itself?
I smell another trial.
I am Judge Chris Gore. Some call me Frank Gore. But thank you to everyone. We'll be back next week with Critics Court, same time, 1 p.m. Pacific time. You are the jury. Join us
next week. I should be
on
back
Critics
at the
Court,
normal
Star
2
Wars
p.m.
on
Eastern
Trial.
Standard
Thank
Time
you so
for
much
this.
for your attendance
For
in
the
court today. I
rewatch.
want to thank the members of the defense and the prosecution, our court sketch artists. All the links are in the description of this episode, including a link to all the charges. We
I
will
put all the
continue
links in my
case number
description as well.
1138. Thank you all.
All right. Cool. I really do like Mr. Blackwood's drawings. I still don't know what to think about Vader drinking blue milk. That's definitely different. That's a visual. Now it's burned into my retinas. I agree 100%. Like I said, I watched only bits and pieces of this when it actually was airing live on YouTube a couple months ago. So I didn't really get to see a whole lot, and that's kind of the reason why I wanted to do this, because I wanted to watch it myself. And at that time, I didn't realize just how good Mr. Blackwood's drawings are. He has been the pleasant surprise of this whole thing. I'll be honest with you. I just love it. I just can't get enough of seeing. I'm sitting there listening to all the arguments and stuff, and the whole time, out of the corner of my eye, I'm looking at seeing what Mr. Blackwood's doing. Because I was going, what's he doing next? What kind of silly things is he going to be drawing? It's kind of cool. Anyway, I am the crazy little Star Wars penguin that I'm hoping that those that have watched this video later or lurking, and also Tracy, I want to thank her and Perrin both for showing up. And I hope you enjoyed listening to both sides of this argument, regardless of how you feel or think about this. I think it's good to keep an open mind to see how things are, and to maybe decide for ourselves, ultimately. And like I said, it's art. It's all in the eye of the beholder. And if it's something you like in current day Star Wars or something you don't like, that is perfectly okay, as long as we disagree agreeably at the end of the day. That's what nerds and geeks do. We argue about this stuff. But as long as we walk away as friends at the end of it, it's all good. So anyway, come back again next week, same time, same Penguin channel, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll continue on with count number 4 of the Star Wars on Trial by Critics Court on Film Threat. Yeah, all day long we argue about stuff. That is what geeks have done since the geeks and nerds have done since the beginning of time. I don't know if it's that long, but it's definitely long. Anyway, I've got to get out of here. I gotta go chase down a TIE fighter. Rochester, he took off in my TIE fighter, and that's not really good. He doesn't know how to fly a TIE fighter. So I gotta go. All right. Catch you all later. And as always, may the fish be with you. Later, peeps.